A look at the agenda in Lansing, plus moving more women into leadership positions in a Me Too world, some pre-primary polling analysis, and the beauty of Detroit design. I'm Christy McDonald, and MiWeek is coming up.
I have a question. Who wants to go first? To win? Who wants to grow our business? Who wants to make more money? Who wants more job opportunities? If you want Michigan to compete and become a top 10 state, raise your hand. Together, we've turned Michigan around and started moving forward. Now help us build a stronger Michigan than ever. Raise your hand at strongermichigan.com.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Hi there, and welcome to MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. This show is all about great conversations this week. Coming up, lawmakers were busy this week in Lansing with two controversial votes, repealing the prevailing wage law and working changes to Medicaid. Stephen Henderson sits down with the top legislators in the state and takes a look at big decisions they're facing in Lansing. Plus, Nolan Finley goes in-depth with pollster Richard Zuba and checks numbers in the governor's race and race for Senate. Also coming up for you, I sit down with three unique and very powerful women for a conversation on female leadership and the Me Too movement. And we will give you an early look at Detroit Public Television's latest documentary on Detroit design. It is all coming up for you on MiWeek. But let's get started with Stephen Henderson's conversation with State Senate Majority Leader Arlen Meekhof, House Minority Leader Sam Singh, and Senator Jim Ananich. They were on Stephen's radio show, Detroit Today, up on Mackinac Island at the Policy Conference, and started off taking a closer look at legislation aimed to protect women in the wake of Larry Nassar's abuse.
Two bills in response to the Nassar scandal are headed to the Governor Rick Snyder's desk. The legislation would increase the amount of time a child victim of sexual assault would have to sue in civil court. It would also give prosecutors more time to file charges in those cases. Although the bills passed almost unanimously, some senators are calling them a watered-down version of what they originally proposed. Will the state's response to this scandal do enough to protect people from this kind of abuse and empower survivors?
In terms of what Michigan State did or didn't do, we're all disappointed in that, and also a little disappointed in the work product that came back from the House. I was hopeful it would be more stringent, more like what the Senate had passed and worked on very diligently. Margaret O'Brien being the champion. We have a start. I'll just say it that way. And we're hoping to do more. And Margaret and others like her are not done working on this. And I think I see Senator Ananich shaking his head, and Sam as well. We have opportunity to do more, and I think we can and we should.
What were the things that disappointed you about that House version?
I think that the survivors were treated very disrespectfully when they testified or were attempting to testify. It just didn't seem like it was given the weight of what we intended when we sent it over the first time. I think my colleagues would concur on that.
You agree with that, Jim?
I 100% agree. I think, this doesn't happen as much in politics as it should, but, Arlen was a good leader on this. And we know we have a great relationship, as I do with Sam, and he did a good job of making sure that they had the resources they needed to make sure we put together a very comprehensive plan. It was the two bills that passed were one Democrat, one Republican. Senator O'Brien has done a tremendous job working with everyone, the survivors, my colleagues, folks in the House that were willing to work. I think Sam's done a good job of leading on this issue as well. And I was disappointed that they treated the survivors so poorly, that they were so concerned about the predators, is probably equally as much as they were about the survivors. Obviously, as Arlen said, Michigan State I'm an alumnus. It's something that it's going to take years to fix, not just the reputation, but the culture over there. And I think we've taken a step in the right direction, but I think there's more steps that need to be taken, and we'll hopefully keep working on those.
Sam, what happened in the House to these bills?
Well, it was actually the committee process, and I think you heard, there was obviously a question about how people were treated during that committee process. The bills that came out of the committee process were not the bills that were sent over by the Senate. They took some key provisions. They put some caps on the statute of limitations. Some of the criminal ones were to remove the cap completely. Why have any statute of limitations on that? And so in the end, we had a vote with what was on the House floor. There were some amendments offered up by some of my colleagues to try to put some of those things back in, and unfortunately, those were not accepted by the majority. And so now we have to take what is good of this and the first step piece, but I do think you'll see on both sides, the House and the Senate, reintroduction of stronger versions of those bills to try to keep that conversation going. Now, the good thing that also happened is that we sent, I want to say, close to 28 bills over to the Senate that talks about a whole series of different issues beyond what the Senate had sent over. So I do think there will be a conversation in Senator Jones's Committee on Law and Justice, or whatever the term is over in the Senate, that will basically take a look at some of these additional provisions that came through the House process. But I agree that we could have done better on those original Senate bills.
I want to ask about governance of the universities, and that's something that's come up in this scandal, is how they're run, and questions about the board of trustees at Michigan State. Should we be thinking about doing that differently than we do?
Well, I mention this often. When universities have a great year and things are going well, they're autonomous and they take all the credit. Okay? When it's going poorly and things are really in trouble, they should take all the credit, right? And deservedly so in this instance, right? Yeah. We should hold them accountable. But again, they're autonomous. They should reap.
Should they be as autonomous as they are?
The Constitution says they are.
Right.
We
would have to change.
You would have to change the Constitution to do that. And I'm not so sure that people aren't even thinking about that, and maybe they are. Yeah. But again, it's unfortunate it is for the survivors and the university. It's going to take them a long time to rebuild their reputation, their finances, their leadership. But I do believe that the folks that are on the board should stay on the board, and they should fix this. It's their responsibility. They let it get here, whether willfully or not, doesn't matter. The results are the same.
You feel like it's their
They should stay there, and they should fix it.
Yeah. I want to change the subject here to the Medicaid expansion work requirements that are being debated. Arlen, talk about why Republicans think this is something we ought to do.
Yeah, well, I think it's Republicans and Democrats. It's both. Yeah, so I think it cuts both ways. I mean, we have some 800,000 people that are eligible under this, and because of the other exceptions, it's really about 350,000 folks that would be required to put in some sort of effort on 20 hours a week of work. And I think anybody who is working and sees other able-bodied people that aren't working, they would like them to have a job. And we have lots of jobs here in Michigan. I think you see help wanted signs everywhere. So I don't think it's really a partisan thing at all. It's really about dignity in work, dignity in their family, all of those things, and I think it's a great opportunity for Michigan.
So there's been some talk about the way that this was crafted. It accepts some folks in rural parts of the state and would be enforced against people in places like Detroit. There's a racial dynamic, of course, that accompanies that. Can you explain that? And
that must be a perception, because I don't believe that to be true.
You don't believe that to be true?
I do not.
Do you believe, though, that the idea of requiring people who are on Medicaid to work is punitive in any way? I mean, the idea
having a job is not punitive. Well, having a job is dignity and value and worth for a person.
Do you think sometimes the burdens of that work look really different for people at the bottom of the economic
scale? The burdens for our work look very different too. I think it's a big part of it is dignity and having a job.
Okay, Jim Ananick, how do you respond to that?
I think there's no question that the best way to help any individual is make sure they have a good job, right? And I think one of the things I brought to Senator Shirkey that this was done pretty quickly, and I think some of the things I wanted to see was we have a fractured child care system, right? There's the quality child care is vastly different from place to place, from institution to institution. The access, we still need to expand that. We've done a good job, I think, of starting to expand it, but we haven't done it all the way. In my community, I also offered to meet to have Senator Shirkey meet with the director of our Mass Transit Authority, because we actually send more people outside of our county than we do internal routes on our bus, because we're sending people to go work all over the place.
To job.
So I think we need to expand programs like that. We need to expand access to child care. We need to make sure that there was some pretty major flaws in this plan. I just don't philosophically believe you should dangle health care over people's heads to say, if you don't do something, us as government, we're going to take it away from you. I understand that's a difference that we may have. Right. I think empowering people to work is a goal we should all have, and I think increasing access to child care, good quality child care, increasing access to transportation is the way to do that. And I think we can do that and have the same effect, and I think that's a better way to do it.
Yeah.
As we move into summer, political campaigns for the primary are heating up. People are closely watching the race for governor and checking out the poll numbers that go along with it. Nolan Finley had a conversation with Richard Zuba, the pollster that the Detroit News uses, while they were up at the Mackinac Policy Conference.
Richard, we are now full-fledged into the 2018 political season. You did some polling for the chamber coming into this conference. You've been doing some polling ongoing. Taking a look at the political climate in Michigan as we head into these very vital midterm elections. Just to set it up, every seat in Michigan is up for grabs this year. That doesn't happen every year. It happens every 8 years. And so here we are, big election year in Michigan. How do you see the climate here in Michigan going into the summer campaign season?
Well, right now we're seeing two different primaries occurring on both sides of the aisle. On the Democratic side, what we're seeing is a dead-even race between Sri Thanedar and Gretchen Whitmer.
Does that surprise you?
Well, I think everybody is surprised that Sri Thanedar has spent essentially $3 million of his own money.
Of his own money.
And he has made himself a viable candidate as a result of that money, that spending.
But can you remain a viable candidate if it's all based on spending your own money?
Well, I think more importantly, does he have support within the Democratic establishment? And it seems Gretchen Whitmer has rounded up all of that support. She has all the levers of turnout for a Democratic primary, and she hasn't spent a cent yet, and she's dead even.
Okay.
So I think in the next coming weeks, we're going to see her go up on the air, and I think this race is going to start shifting considerably in her favor.
Yeah, just for the fact that she's entering the advertising game, where Thanedar has been for all of these weeks. Does this suggest any sort of weakness in her campaign? The fact that this unknown candidate has come out of nowhere and is dead even with her?
Well, campaigns are a marathon. They're not a sprint. Yeah. And in this case, what we're looking at is I think Whitmer's campaign has been very steady. They know what they want to accomplish. They do have a hole in terms of name ID in Southeast Michigan, particularly Wayne County. That can be made up on television. What cannot be made up is how you turn out your vote.
Yeah.
And that's where she's going to have a clear advantage on primary day.
So, third candidate in this race, Abdul El-Sayed, is he non-factor?
At this stage, he's in single digits. It would take considerable resources, which he doesn't appear to have, to really make a mark here in this race. I don't expect that he's going to be a real contender for the nomination.
So let's look to the Republican side of the primary.
This is one where you've got Bill Schuette, the Attorney General, running against the Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley. They are the two front runners. Our latest polling had Bill Schuette with about a 12-point lead. But recently we've been seeing, since the Trump rally in legislative polling.
The Trump rally in Michigan, in Macomb County.
Right. That Bill Schuette really seems to have been hitting the gas pedal. Seems to be pulling away from Brian Calley and widening his lead.
Do you see that as a Trump factor?
Absolutely.
So, the popular wisdom is that it might be risky to run with Trump. You're seeing in Michigan, that's not a bad thing.
In a Republican primary.
In a Republican primary.
In fact, in a Republican primary, anybody who is not embracing Donald Trump is not going to have a chance of winning that nomination.
So, looking out as this primary unfolds, do you see this Schuette lead extending? What does Calley have to do?
Well, I think the dynamics are there for Bill Schuette to win comfortably in the nomination right now. I think Brian Kelly, has gone, frankly, pretty negative.
Is that turning off voters?
I think it might be, particularly Republican primary voters. Brian Kelly had a lot of room yet to grow in terms of name ID.
Yeah.
So it's a big risk to start attacking your opponent when they don't know you yet.
Right. So looking to the general election, your polling now indicates a Schuette Whitmer race. What do you see in terms of enthusiasm level between Republican and Democratic voters at this stage?
Well, right now we see both bases equally motivated to vote.
Okay.
I do see a problem Republicans are facing with those voters who aren't call themselves more supporters of the Republican Party than Donald Trump.
Okay.
They are less motivated to vote right now.
And that's about a third of the Republicans?
That is about a third of Republicans. And I think that is where there may be weakness on the Republican turnout side in terms of enthusiasm. I think the real story in this election is going to be watch the motivation of independents to vote. Michigan elections are decided by Southeast Michigan independents, and they are highly motivated to vote right now.
Which way?
Right now, they are leaning in favor of the Democrats.
So, at this point, Richard Schuette, would you say advantage Democrats in Michigan?
I say right now, Democrats have some wind at their backs. It's reflective of what we're seeing nationally right now. Whether that holds is the real question we face in this campaign.
And of course we saw in 2016 it didn't hold.
That's right. It all collapsed on the Democrats in the final week.
Okay, turning now just real quickly to the Senate race. Does Debbie Stabenow have anything to worry about in her re-election bid?
Debbie Stabenow is very well positioned, I believe. I think the Republicans are going to have a very tough time really, truly challenging her in this race.
Do you think this is a race national Republicans will put money into?
I do not.
Okay.
I do not. I don't think the contenders started early enough. I don't think they've been strong enough in terms of their campaigns.
Okay.
And Debbie Stabenow, one of the great pastimes for Republicans is discount Debbie Stabenow.
Okay. Richard Schuette, we got to go. Okay. We're going to play this back the day after the election to see just how you did.
Now that would be interesting. We should do that. Among all the conversations surrounding politics and business up at the Mackinac Policy Conference, there were pointed ones about more women in leadership in this Me Too era. I had an interesting discussion with Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, the CEO of Consumers Energy, Patti Poppe, and former U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuade about change in the workplace.
The Me Too movement has been not only about sexual harassment and sexual assault, but female empowerment in general. And it's been wonderful to me to see so many women now seeking political office. And whether that's a reaction to the election of President Trump and some of the things he has said about women or the Me Too movement, it's been wonderful to see more women getting involved in running for public office, because I think when we have women in those leadership roles, it does change the culture. And so I think it's a really exciting moment for women. It's, this is not a panacea, the battle's not over.
Right.
But I do think it's a very positive step in the right direction.
But to your point, Debbie, though, how do you keep that momentum where people, what you would say in the real world, are feeling that kind of culture change, whether it is the waitress, whether it is that middle management, whether it is someone on the shop floor?
First of all, it takes leadership. So that Patti at her company and more women in those leadership positions are going to help to make that possible. Some of us watched Anita Hill and we thought, oh, a moment's here, and that moment disappeared. So all of us have to be committed to continuing to make sure that that happens. But one of the things that I think we have to understand, and Patti's correct, we have to change the culture, because for too many women, there are consequences. There are consequences of saying something. It may be economic consequences. I mean, shortly after I spoke out in November, I must have had 20 women come to me in the first 24 hours, including a woman who had been sexually assaulted by multiple men on a factory floor. And I said, we have to go do something about it. And she was like, no, you don't understand what will happen to me. My reputation will be ruined. I need this job. So we have to change the culture. So one, men can't do that and think they can get away with it. And I think the younger generation is zero tolerance. I think all of us have hundreds of stories. I think the millennials are zero tolerance, and that's going to be one of the changes that we're going to see.
I think that's interesting you say that, because it's the degrees of, is it worth Is it worth saying something? Is it worth, or it's like, oh, well, I'll just kind of end around and figure out how to get around this situation. Patti, talk to me a little bit about how the differences of women and more women in leadership, and when other women see that coming up, how that can maybe change their trajectory in what they see as possible in their roles and in their future careers.
Yeah, it surprised me when I was named CEO of Consumers and CMS Energy. It surprised me how many young women were so excited about that, that it was special, and that meant for them that it was possible. And I underestimated that myself. You know, I've often, in all parts of my career, been one of the very few women, and so I just had become accustomed to that. But then at Consumers, we have over 30% of my senior management team, my officers, and our board of directors are women. So I'm not alone, so it didn't feel unusual in my case that a woman would become CEO. But for women outside of my company, women around Michigan and the country, to see a woman reach that kind of achievement really does make them believe that it's possible for them too. So I do think there's timing. I do think it's an amazing time. It's a watershed era, I think, for women, and we just need to, as you said, Debbie, we can't let that fade. We just need to build on that momentum and celebrate diversity and empowering women to be all that they can be, and not, self-limit.
And finally, Detroit is known for its unique architecture and design. And this weekend on Detroit Public Television, it's the world premiere of our documentary, Detroit Designs the World. Take a look.
Most people don't know about Detroit architecture, right? They either haven't been in the city or they've seen some of the negative headlines and pictures, and they haven't had the opportunity to experience these buildings.
Places like Chicago and New York seemed to always get the attention when there was fabulous work being done here in Detroit.
We're this amazing birthplace of so many things that changed the world. The people were nurtured here that then went out to create these amazing things that changed the landscape of architecture.
I think that at the time it was very well known. I've seen articles from the 50s that are all about Detroit design, and it wasn't about cars. And I think what happened was that that got lost.
A country almost doubling its building investment in about 10 years' time, an investment of about $500 billion.
What kind of beauty are we going to buy with all that money?
Architecture also has the purpose of marking and enhancing man's time on Earth.
The buildings themselves become logos for the corporations that built them.
One of the things that's evident as I researched his work was the number of times that he used the word beauty in the 50s and 60s when other architects weren't.
Detroit was renowned for its architecture. It was viewed as a wonder of the world.
Without Detroit, you don't have mid-century modern or modernism in the way that we know it today.
Fascinating and beautiful. It's going to be a good one. You can see it June 9th at 5 p.m. And that is going to do it for My Week. We'll be back next Thursday with a special show for you. We are heading downtown for a show all on the Detroit riverfront. It is a great way to kick off the summer. So join us next Thursday. For all of us at Detroit Public TV, I'm Christy McDonald. We will see you next time. Take care.
I have a question. Who wants to go first? To win? Who wants to grow our business? Who wants to make more money? Who wants more job opportunities? If you want Michigan to compete and become a top 10 state, raise your hand. Together, we've turned Michigan around and started moving forward. Now help us build a stronger Michigan than ever. Raise your hand at strongermichigan.com.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.